The boss of Australia Post threatened to call police unless the City of Melbourne delivered One Nation merchandise to every apartment in a locked-down public housing tower. According to 9 newspapers, Christine Holgate made the request in July. That was just days after One Nation leader Pauline Hanson labelled the residents drug addicts and alcoholics. Officials decided against distributing One Nation stubby holders, that is council officials, deciding they could inflame tensions in the towers. At the time, Australia Post was seeking the party's support to extend a temporary relaxation in daily postal services. Joining me live now is Deputy Labor Leader Richard Marles. Thanks for your time. We'll get to the Melbourne situation in a moment. What did you make of this story, first of all?
I think this is astounding. And the double standard that we've got here is absolutely palpable. I mean, you've got a government which is working with Christina Holgate and Pauline Hanson to put in place regulations which exist now, which have effectively doubled the delivery time in capital cities. You've got Australia Post saying to people that they can't expect their mail to be delivered on time on Father's Day. But if you're Pauline Hanson, you can contact the CEO of Australia Post and make sure that your stubby holders get delivered to the council towers in Victoria. That is an appalling situation. And it says everything about how this government goes about its business, but how there is a complete double standard out there. Pauline Hanson can get deliveries straight away via personally the CEO. Everyone else has to wait for their mail.
Well, was there any evidence Pauline Hanson was the one? Wasn't it Australia Post that were told the deliveries wouldn't happen and then insisted this is a basic right, that you can't edit someone's mail, for want of a better word?
Of course, and it is a basic right, and we should be getting our mail delivered on time. And people should have got their mail on Father's Day. And I think a regulation that the government has put in place, which sees the delivery times of mail almost doubled in capital cities, is appalling. Mail should be delivered on time. I'm just not sure why Pauline Hanson gets a personal exception in circumstances where the CEO of Australia Post personally intervenes to make sure that her mail actually gets delivered in the way that she wants. The government from the outset of Corona have been using this crisis, the coronavirus crisis, to cut services to Australia Post, to cut delivery times. That's what's going on here. And that's what the regulation, which has gone through, has done.
All right, well,
and it's gone through with the support of Pauline Hanson. Christina Holgate's right there in the middle of it. I think this is scandalous.
And obviously the issue the government and Australia Post say was they wanted to prioritise packages, a lot of them being sent at the moment. But let me just clarify this. You're saying the Australia Post boss here, Christina Holgate, has done anything wrong?
Well, what we're seeing here is personal intervention at the level of the CEO of Australia Post when it comes to Pauline Hanson's mail. That's what we're seeing. But when it comes to everybody else's mail...
Is that wrongdoing?
Well, I'll tell you what's wrong. What's wrong here is that every other Australian has to receive a message from Australia Post that their mail on Australia Day on Father's Day, I should say, is going to be delayed. That we've got a regulation which has now gone through, which sees delivery times almost doubled. That's what applies to everybody in Australia. But if you're Pauline Hanson, you manage somehow to see the CEO of Australia Post act in your interests to make sure your mail is delivered on time. I don't reckon any of that's
Are you drawing the direct link between legislation that One Nation supported and the CEO wading in this circumstance?
Have a look at the timing. Have a look at the timing, Tom. And I think all of this is absolutely outrageous. But at the end of the day, the Australia Post CEO has to explain why she, in respect of one individual, has gone to such lengths to make sure that her mail is delivered on time, whereas the rest of Australia has to wait and not see their mail delivered on time for Father's Day.
We've invited her onto the program, so still welcome in case anyone at AusPost is watching, still welcome to come on and explain the issue. Let's move on to the situation in Melbourne. Just interested, what did you make of Bill Shorten's comments? He said that he would have liked restrictions to have come off earlier. His indication here is this is a bit of a conservative path out by Daniel Andrews. Do you agree?
Look, the roadmap that's been put in place has been developed on the basis of all the best medical advice. This is difficult. It's obviously a difficult situation that we're in, but I think we need to take a step back and just remember two things. Firstly, Victorians are doing a magnificent job in abiding by a really difficult set of regulations towards an end. And that end is being achieved. The numbers are coming down. And I'm not sure, what choices the Victorian government have here. I mean, at the end of the day, we've got a Prime Minister who is saying we need to see borders be opened around the country. I think it would be a good thing if we could have borders open around the country. But if you're sitting in Gladys Berejiklian's chair, what do you need to see happen in Victoria in order for you to open up the Victoria-New South Wales border? And let's work our way back from there. And when you think about it through that lens, I'm not sure that Victoria has any choice but to go down the path that Daniel Andrews is taking us.
Well, let's talk through the choice then. What's being asked here, including by epidemiologists and even some that were asked to contribute to the modelling, is why not have different parameters? You can have, this might be termed Plan A, the most conservative route, but why not have a Plan B that talks about improved contact tracing and possible earlier dates and indeed higher numbers to open at? Because if you have better contact tracing, you don't need the cases to get as low. Wouldn't that have provided some more hope for Melburnians?
Well, first, I think there is hope. The numbers are coming down. The measures that have been put in place already by Daniel Andrews are working. But what will be required for the New South Wales government to make a decision to open the border with Victoria? And I don't say that with any criticism to the New South Wales government. I think I can well understand the situation they're in. But I think when you see it through that prism, it becomes clear that the problem that the Victorian government's trying to solve here is pretty difficult. And the other point is that we absolutely cannot, under any circumstances, see a third wave hit this state. That would be appalling. But let's, this is difficult, and difficult decisions are being made. And I get there's a bit of a pile-on going on in relation to the Andrews government at the moment. I mean, you can make criticisms and pick holes here and there. At the end of the day, no one denies the fact that it's a really difficult situation. A significant intervention has been put in place by the government, and it is working. But what we're seeing from our Prime Minister, and bear in mind Victoria is part of Australia, and the federal government has a whole lot of responsibility here, is a guy who is basically leading the cheer squad for the pile-on in respect of Daniel Andrews. I mean, we don't have a Prime Minister here who's rolling up his sleeves and standing shoulder to shoulder with the Victorian government in order to get us through this crisis. He has gone to the sidelines and is doing nothing but heckling.
What he wants to do and what he's pushing for is to see the in-depth modelling and see if there is a possible earlier way out. That would be helpful, wouldn't it? And not just at a government-to-government level, but why not get all the information out there? We don't have the full modelling released. Don't we need all the information on the table here? This is a huge decision. There's not just health advice that they go, right, here's what to do. There's modelling, there's parameters, there's decision, there's risk appetite. Don't we deserve to know all that information when we're told of the decision that's been made based on it?
Of course. The more information that you can put into or governments can put into the public domain, the better. There's no doubt about that. But why does Scott Morrison choose to make that? Why isn't Scott Morrison making the basis of his activity standing shoulder to shoulder with the Victorian government in dealing with what is obviously a difficult situation? Instead, what we've got is a Prime Minister who is using this moment to point the finger at Daniel Andrews and try and have the whole world blame him for everything that's going wrong in relation to the coronavirus. That is one of the most low-rent acts that I have seen a Prime Minister engage in. I mean, this is not a man who is getting into the mix here and who is actually making a difference. This is a guy who has relegated himself to the sidelines and is doing nothing other than being the cheerleader for those who want to pile on in relation to Daniel Andrews in the hope that he escapes any blame. Let's be clear. The most lethal part of everything that has occurred in Victoria has happened in relation to aged care, wholly and solely the responsibility of the federal government. And where's Scott Morrison in relation to that? I mean, we are not seeing a Prime Minister here. We're just seeing a guy
that continues to be federal Labor's emphasis, not the handling by the Andrews government, not the hotel quarantine issue, 99% of this second wave stemming from that, not the fact that contact tracing by Daniel Andrews' own concessions this week was just not up to scratch. Shouldn't you be commenting about that as well?
But Labor is doing that, Tom. I mean, were there problems with hotel quarantining? Yes. And Daniel Andrews has acknowledged that. Is there problems with contact tracing? Yes. And Daniel Andrews has acknowledged that. Daniel Andrews has stood up for something like 70 days in a row and taken absolute responsibility for failings.
But what's responsibility if we
state.
can't find out the basic things such as who made the decision on quarantine, and if it was a decision somewhere that ultimately goes back to a minister, that minister would lose their job? That's responsibility, isn't it?
Well, and in the very first days in relation to this, Daniel Andrews sets up a judicial inquiry, which is looking at all of those questions without fear or favour, and we're going to get to the bottom of all of that. But put that in contrast to what we see from Scott Morrison. I mean, Scott Morrison isn't doing anything remotely like this when it comes to aged care. I mean, he's not standing up and taking responsibility day in and day
can I just clarify
out in
that
relation to those issues.
If this
there is a vast gulf between the way
back,
those two people are leading.
Whomever's made that decision, whomever's ultimately responsible for that hotel quarantine decision in this inquiry, I mean, they should lose their job, right?
Well, let's see what the inquiry says. I'm not about to prejudge that. But let's see how that rolls out. But the important point to understand now, Tom, in terms of those questions, is that wherever that leads, it was initiated by Daniel Andrews at the get-go. No hesitation at all. Acceptance of responsibility, putting in place a process where they get to the bottom of the issues of things that have gone wrong. We do not see anything remotely like that from Scott Morrison.
Right out of time. Richard Marles, we'll talk again soon. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom.